I disown James and Isabella. The words echoed across the Hawaiian wedding venue like a gunshot in the tropical evening. Silence stretched between the palm trees and string lights as hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Isabella's face twisted from shock to fury, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the rage burning beneath. "You've ruined my wedding," she screamed, her voice shrill enough to scatter the nearby birds. "I curse you." The microphone trembled in my hands as I watched my eldest son, my James, stand frozen beside his bride. Not once did he step forward to defend me. Not once did he look ashamed of what they had done. How had it come to this? How had I, Eleanor, a respected doctor of 30 years, ended up disowning my own flesh and blood at his wedding? The answer lay in the months of manipulation, threats, and betrayal that had led to this moment. But to understand it all, I need to go back to where it started. Back to the day my world first cracked apart. Richard had been pale when he came home that evening, his medical bag dropping by the door with unusual heaviness. After 30 years of marriage, I knew every line on his face, every shift in his posture. This was different. This was the look of a man carrying news that would change everything. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said, his voice grave in a way that made my stomach clench. "I had some tests done last week. The results, they came back. It's cancer, Eleanor. Cancer." The word hung in our living room like a death sentence, which, in many ways, it was. I remembered thinking about all the patients I had delivered similar news to over the years. How I had practiced that careful balance of honesty and hope, never quite knowing if I struck it right. Now, sitting across from my husband in our big, cozy house that had always been filled with the sounds of life, I understood what it felt like to be on the receiving end. The months that followed blurred into a nightmare of hospital visits, treatments, and endless waiting rooms. Richard fought with everything he had, but the cancer was merciless. Watching the strongest man I knew wither away was torture that no amount of medical training could have prepared me for. During one of our quiet evenings, as Richard grew weaker, he took my hand with fingers that felt like paper. "Eleanor, if things don't go our way, you need to make sure everything's sorted with the boys. The will's all done. You'll be fine financially." He always thought of others first, even when facing his own mortality. It was one of the reasons I had fallen in love with him all those years ago, back when we were both young doctors trying to build something meaningful together. After he was gone, the funeral became a somber affair with family, friends, and colleagues paying their respects. But it was the quiet afterward, the empty spaces Richard used to fill, that hit me hardest. His coffee mug still sat by the kitchen sink where he had left it that final morning. I couldn't bring myself to wash it for weeks. It was just a few days post-funeral when James stormed into the kitchen, his face twisted with worry and anger. Oliver trailed behind him, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's will," James said, cutting straight to the chase as he always did. I sighed, setting down the cling film I had been using to wrap leftover casseroles. "Yes, I know. Your father left everything to me. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of." James slammed his hand on the counter with a bang that made me jump. "But what about me and Oliver? We're his sons. It's not right that we get nothing now." The accusation stung more than I expected. As if Richard and I hadn't spent years planning, saving, sacrificing to build the life we had. As if we hadn't always intended for our boys to be provided for. Oliver tried to smooth things over, his voice gentle but firm. "James, let's not jump into this so hot-headed. Mom's still grieving. We can sort this out without arguing." But James shot him a glare that reminded me uncomfortably of how he used to look at his younger brother when they were children and James didn't get his way. "Easy for you to say. You're not thinking about the future like I am." I leaned against the counter, feeling the weight of their stares and my own exhaustion. "Your father and I built this together. He trusted me to handle things. But I hear you, James. It's not my plan to cut you out." "So what then?" James said, crossing his arms, his voice rising a notch. "We just wait until, what? You think it's a good time to give us our share?" "James, watch your tone," I snapped, my patience fraying. "I am still your mother." Oliver stepped between us, his hands up like a referee. Both of you, please. This isn't helping. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. The grief was still so fresh, so raw, and now I had to navigate this too. Okay, here's what we can do. The apartments your father and I invested in, the ones downtown. Yes, those, James interrupted. I shot him a look that told him to zip it for a minute. I was thinking you each take one. They're yours to live in or rent out. And from the savings, let's say $25,000 each to help you get started on whatever you need. James chewed on his lip, clearly doing the math in his head. And the rest of the stuff? The house, the money. That stays with me for now. When I'm gone, it'll come to you, as per your father's wishes, I said firmly. James looked like he wanted to argue more, but Oliver nudged him. Let's think about this, man. It's a fair start. Mom's not leaving us in the cold. James finally nodded, tight-lipped. Fine. But I want this in writing, Mom. No more surprises. Of course, I agreed. We'll get everything documented properly. As they left the kitchen, I could hear Oliver hissing at James, give her a break, will you? She's doing her best. James muttered something under his breath I couldn't catch, and I didn't really want to. As I washed up the dishes, I wondered if Richard could see us and what he'd think. I hoped I was doing the right thing, but only time would tell. And time, that tricky thing, wasn't always a friend. It was a sunny afternoon, one of those rare kinds that makes everything seem all right, when James brought Isabella over to meet me for the first time. They hadn't been dating long, but James was already head over heels. You could tell by the way he was fussing over her, which wasn't like him at all. Isabella had this air about her from the moment she walked in, like she owned the place. Dressed to the nines, she breezed into my living room with barely a hello, her eyes scanning everything with the calculating gaze of an appraiser. Nice place you've got here, she said, flipping her perfectly styled hair back as she sat down without waiting for an invitation. I forced a smile, trying to be the good host. Thank you, Isabella. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Coffee sounds lovely, she replied, then turned to James. Babe, make sure it's black, no sugar. The casual way she ordered my son around in my own home made something cold settle in my stomach. But James nodded and headed to the kitchen like an obedient puppy. That left me alone with her, sitting in my own living room feeling like the guest. The silence was awkward until she broke it. So, James tells me you're pretty well off, she started, still eyeing the decor with that appraising look. I'm used to a certain standard, you know. My parents made sure of that. There was something in her tone, a casual entitlement that immediately put me on edge. I had seen this before in some of my wealthier patients' children, that assumption that money would always be there, that comfort was a birthright rather than something earned. That's good to hear, I said, not sure what else to add. James came back with the coffee and handed Isabella her cup. She took a sip and made a face. It's all right. The dismissive way she critiqued my coffee in my own home was like a small slap. But she wasn't done. Anyway, we've been discussing our future together. Planning ahead, you know. That's wise, I said, glancing at James, hoping he'd give me some clue about where this conversation was heading. Isabella set her cup down with a decisive click. Yeah. And speaking of planning, we were thinking about the wedding. You know, I want something special. James has probably told you, I saw this place, perfect for a rehearsal dinner. But it's a bit pricey. It's about $30,000. I choked on my coffee. $30,000? Just for the rehearsal dinner? James jumped in, his voice eager in that way that told me he was trying to convince himself as much as me. Mom, it's important to Bella. We want to start things off right. I put my cup down, feeling a storm brewing inside my chest. Look, that's a lot of money for a dinner, Isabella. We need to be reasonable. Isabella's face hardened, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the flash of anger in her eyes. Reasonable? James says you have the means. I don't see why we should compromise on something this important. The word compromise came out of her mouth like it tasted bitter. Here was a young woman who had clearly never been told no in her life, never had to adjust her expectations to match reality. James was nodding along with her, but I could see the unease in his eyes. Somewhere deep down, he knew he was asking too much. I'm all for celebrating, I said, trying to keep my voice even. But $30,000 is beyond excessive. I can't justify that. Isabella stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not used to compromising on my standards, Eleanor. I was clear with James that I expect a certain lifestyle. The way she said my name, with that slight curl of disdain, made my blood pressure spike. This girl, this child, was sitting in my home, drinking my coffee, and lecturing me about standards. James tried to smooth things over, his voice pleading. Mom, maybe we can find a middle ground. There's no middle ground on $30,000 for a dinner, James. That's final, I snapped, losing my patience. Isabella picked up her purse, glaring at me with naked hostility. Fine. If that's how it's going to be, then maybe we need to reconsider some things. The threat was clear, hanging in the air like smoke. They left soon after, and I sat there reeling from the encounter. The nerve of that girl, coming into my home and telling me how to spend my money. It felt like a slap in the face, a wake-up call I wasn't ready for. But it was only the beginning. I was out at the grocery store when James and Isabella decided to drop by again. By the time I got home, Oliver was awkwardly entertaining them in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, the kind that makes you want to turn around and leave. But it was my house, so I braced myself and walked in. Isabella, all dolled up as usual, handed me a list as soon as I set down my grocery bags. Eleanor, we thought a lot about the wedding gifts, and here's what we've settled on. I hope this will be easier for you to handle. I skimmed the list she first handed me. It was surprisingly sensible: kitchen appliances, some nice china, even a couple of pieces of furniture. This seems quite reasonable, I said, feeling a momentary relief wash over me. I think these are wonderful choices, really. James looked at Isabella, a hopeful expression crossing his face. Maybe they had listened. Maybe we could work this out after all. But just as I was about to discuss where we could buy these items, Isabella's expression changed abruptly. She gasped dramatically, her hand flying to her chest. Oh no. This isn't right. Give that back. She snatched the list from my hands and rummaged through her purse, pulling out another sheet of paper. Here's the actual list. This new list was nothing like the first. It included an apartment, a luxury car, an exclusive vacation, and even diamond jewelry. The numbers swam before my eyes: tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. My jaw dropped. Is this some kind of joke? Isabella didn't flinch. No joke, Eleanor. These are the gifts we expect. Only the best for our wedding. I stared at her, then at James, waiting for him to say something, anything, to suggest he didn't agree with this madness. But he just stood there, looking between us, clearly conflicted but silent. The silence stretched until I couldn't hold back anymore. James, why are you letting her do this? You know this is unreasonable. Isabella cut in, her voice rising to a shriek. This doesn't concern you, Eleanor. You just need to pay up and keep quiet. The audacity of it took my breath away. In my own home, this girl was telling me to keep quiet and pay up like some kind of ATM. That's when Oliver stood up, his face set hard. That's enough, Isabella. You're not going to talk to our mom like that. This is her house, and you're way out of line. You need to leave. Now. The room was thick with tension as James and Isabella gathered their things. Isabella was muttering under her breath, clearly angry. This is ridiculous. We'll remember this. They left, and the door slammed shut behind them. I sat down heavily, feeling the weight of the whole situation pressing down on me. Oliver sat beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders. We'll figure this out, Mom. But you can't let them bully you into giving more than you can or should. It's not right. He was right, of course. But as I sat there with my son, I couldn't help but worry about James. How had things gotten so out of hand? How could he not see what this was doing to our family? I knew then that this was far from over. It was only going to get tougher from here. The weeks that followed were a constant barrage of phone calls from James. Each one was more demanding than the last, his tone desperate, almost frantic at times. "Mom, you don't understand. I can't look poor next to Bella's family," he'd argue, his voice cracking with stress. "You have the money. Why can't you just help me out here?" I'd sit at the kitchen table, phone pressed against my ear, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "James, it's not about the money. It's about living within your means. Bella's expectations, you can't sustain that. Not without going into serious debt." He'd scoff, his frustration boiling over. "What do you know about it? I'm not going to live like a pauper. I need more from the inheritance. Now. James, I've offered to cover half the wedding costs, up to $15,000, and give a $5,000 gift. That's more than generous. But everything has to be agreed upon with me though. No surprises." There was a pause, then a sharp laugh from him that made my heart ache. "That's nothing. You're just being stingy. You have $1 million sitting there. Why are you holding out on me?" "Because it's not just about the money," I replied, my patience wearing thin. "It's about not feeding into this fantasy that's going to ruin you." He yelled then, loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I don't need this. I'll handle it my way. Forget you." And then, just like that, the call stopped. Months passed in silence. I tried to busy myself with daily routines, trying not to worry about James. But the peace was short-lived. The phone rang one afternoon, and it was my sister-in-law, Anita. "Eleanor, I thought you should know." Anita's voice was hesitant, careful. "James is flying all the wedding guests to Hawaii. He sold his apartment to fund it, and he expects you to get there on your own. He mentioned you weren't interested in helping, so..." I hung up, a mix of anger and sorrow churning inside me. How could he be so reckless? How could he throw away his future like this? Before I could process it all, Oliver came into the room, his expression grim. "Mom, there's something you need to hear." I recorded their conversation when they were sitting here in the living room. He handed me an audio recorder with trembling hands. I pressed play, and the voices of James and Isabella filled the kitchen. Isabella's voice, cold and calculating. "James, your mom is just a nasty old woman with a fat wallet. We need to squeeze as much as we can out of her, and then cut her off." James's voice, chillingly agreeable. "Whatever it takes, Bella. I'm not going to let her control us. If it comes down to it, I'll kick her out in her underwear." I turned off the recorder, my hands trembling. To hear my own son speak like that about me, his mother, it was too much. The room spun as I tried to comprehend the depth of his betrayal. This was the boy I had raised, the child I had rocked to sleep, the young man I had helped through college. And now he was planning to leave me with nothing for the sake of a woman who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. Flying to Hawaii was a decision I didn't make lightly. Oliver was by my side, both of us tense but determined to face whatever awaited us. When we landed and approached the venue, I was taken aback by the sheer opulence of it all. Flowers everywhere, lights strung like stars across the evening sky, and music floating in the air. As we walked into the gathering, I spotted James and Isabella mingling with guests. They looked like a picture-perfect couple, all smiles and laughter. My heart ached to see my son so lost in this fabricated paradise. Before I could take another step toward them, Isabella spotted us. Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl as she marched over, her high heels clicking angrily against the stone pathway. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, stopping just inches from me, her voice loud enough to draw attention. "This is my day, and you're not welcome." I was stunned, but before I could respond, her parents, who had overheard, came over. Her father, a tall, stern-looking man, spoke first. "Isabella, that is no way to speak to your guest, much less to James's mother." His tone was harsh, a reprimand that made her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Her mother, looking equally appalled, turned to me with an apologetic smile. "Eleanor, please come with us. Let's find you a place to sit." They guided us away, leading us to a table at the edge of the setup. Clearly an afterthought, with no proper setting. The ceremony started soon after, with speeches that felt hollow given the tension. Then, unexpectedly, I was handed the microphone. I stood, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. This was it. This was the moment everything had been building toward. I came here today to wish my son and his new wife a happy future, I began, my voice steady despite the trembling inside. But I also believe in honesty and integrity, something that's been sorely missing from the events leading up to this day. Isabella's face went from pink to red, her eyes glaring daggers at me. I was asked for money time and again, in amounts that no reasonable person would find justifiable. When I couldn't meet these demands, I was threatened with separation from my family and future grandchildren. My voice cracked a bit, but I pressed on. Oliver, seeing my distress, stepped closer, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. I nodded at him, then turned on the audio recording he had made. Isabella's voice filled the air, cold and calculating, discussing how they would milk more money from me. James's voice agreed, saying he was prepared to leave me with nothing for the sake of his bride. The crowd murmured, the air thick with shock and disapproval. I turned off the recorder, the silence heavy. I gave my son an apartment and $25,000, and yet it was never enough. Today, I'm making it clear, I will not be treated as an ATM or threatened. I am disowning James and Isabella. I wish them well, but from this day forward, I am choosing to remove myself from their lives. The reaction was immediate. Isabella screamed, her voice shrill and wild, "You've ruined my wedding. I curse you." And that brought us back to this moment. Standing here with the microphone in my hands, watching my son's face as he realized what he had lost. Not once did he step forward to defend me. Not once did he look ashamed. I handed the microphone back and walked away, Oliver beside me. Behind us, I could hear the chaos erupting, but I didn't look back. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Coming back home was bittersweet. In the quiet, I made a decision that startled even me. I quit my job. I'd spent years healing others as a doctor, but now it was time to heal myself and rebuild the life that recent storms had scattered. Oliver, bless his heart, had just graduated from art college and was brimming with ideas and ambition. With the $25,000 I had given him, he opened his own tattoo parlor. It wasn't just any shop, it quickly became a place where art and skin met in stunning displays. Oliver poured his soul into his work, and it paid off. He started entering tattoo contests, and soon enough his name was on every local's lips. Before we knew it, he was opening more locations, creating a network of salons that became hotspots for tattoo enthusiasts. I'd watch him sketch late into the night, his dedication a stark contrast to the chaos his brother had chosen. "You're doing amazing, Ollie," I'd say, pride swelling in my chest. It was during these calm months that James reappeared. One afternoon, he showed up at the door, his eyes tired, his shoulders slumped. So different from the ambitious, sharp man he once was. "Mom, I need to talk," he said, not waiting for an invitation to sit. His voice was weary, a far cry from the demanding tone I'd grown accustomed to. I sighed, motioning for him to continue. "What is it, James?" "It's Bella. She's driving me insane. Once more and more, nothing's ever enough. I got a second job, but it's still not enough for her." His words were desperate, but they couldn't erase the past so easily. "James, I warned you. I told you living like that, with someone like her, it's unsustainable." He rubbed his face, frustration clear. I know you did. But I thought." His voice trailed off, hopelessness taking the place of explanation. "Thought what? That money would just appear because you wanted it to?" My tone was harsh, but years of pent-up frustration made it hard to soften it. "Look at your brother. He started with the same amount and made something of himself without stepping on others." James bristled. "Yeah, well, not everyone's like Oliver, are they? I have rights to the inheritance too, remember. And when you're gone, it'll come to me." That was the last straw. "Get out, James," I said, my voice cold and resolute. "And don't come back. Not this time. You chose your path. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might argue more. But then he turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. As I stood in the silence that followed, Oliver came downstairs, having heard the last part of our exchange. "Are you okay, Mom?" I nodded, wrapping my arms around him. "I am now, thanks to you. Let's just focus on the good we can do, on the life we can build." He hugged me back, his presence a comforting assurance that not all was lost. In that moment, I knew that despite the heartaches, the journey was still worth it. We had each other, and that was enough to keep moving forward. After the storm had passed with James, our home settled into a calm I hadn't felt in years. It was during this quiet period that Oliver brought someone special home. Her name was Sarah, and she was everything Isabella wasn't: kind, humble, and genuinely caring. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship grew stronger, and soon they announced their engagement. The wedding, unlike the extravagant affair that was James's, was a simple, heartfelt ceremony in our backyard. Flowers from the garden, homemade decorations, and a small group of close friends and family made the day perfect. During the reception, I pulled Oliver aside. "You've chosen a wonderful woman," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He squeezed my hand. "I learned from the best," he replied, giving me a knowing look. Life moved quickly after that. They sold the apartment I had given Oliver, adding a bit of their savings to buy a small, cozy house just a few miles away. One sunny afternoon, while we were having tea in their new living room, Sarah shared some news. "Eleanor, we're expecting twins," she announced, her eyes shining with excitement. I nearly dropped my cup, overwhelmed with joy. "Twins? Oh my goodness, that's wonderful." Oliver beamed, his pride evident. "We wanted you to be the first to know. We're really happy, Mom." "Twins," I repeated, letting the words sink in. "Grandchildren." It was a new chapter, one I was eager to start. As for James, news from him was sparse. The last I heard, he had divorced Isabella. She had taken nearly everything in the split, leaving him to start over in another city. Despite the pain he had caused, it hurt to know he was out there somewhere, struggling because of his choices. One evening, as I sat looking through old photo albums, Oliver came and sat beside me. He noticed a picture of James and me from years ago. "Do you ever hear from him?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No. After everything, he's chosen his path, and I have to respect that. Even if it breaks my heart." Oliver put an arm around me. "He's still my brother, Mom. Maybe one day he'll come around." "Maybe," I agreed, not really sure if I believed it. "But for now, we have plenty to keep us busy. Especially with those twins on the way." Oliver chuckled. "Yeah, you're about to be the busiest grandma in town." We both laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. Despite the past, despite the mistakes and heartaches, this moment here with Oliver felt like everything was exactly as it should be. Life was moving on, and so were we, with new hopes and dreams just on the horizon.